My parents favored my brother for 29 years. I finally stood up for myself at his engagement party. You won't believe what happened next. I'm Alice, 29F, and I've always felt like the black sheep in my family. Growing up in a small Midwestern town, our family dynamics were shaped by traditional values and high expectations. My older brother, Max, 32M, has been the golden child since we were kids. He excelled at sports, particularly football, which was a big deal in our community. Max got perfect grades, had a magnetic personality that drew people to him, and seemed to effortlessly meet every expectation our parents set. I, on the other hand, was quieter and more introverted. From a young age, I was drawn to art and creativity. I remember spending hours in our backyard, sketching the old oak tree or creating elaborate fairy houses from twigs and leaves. While Max was out scoring touchdowns, I was in my room, lost in my sketchbooks or reading novels that transported me to different worlds. Our parents, especially our dad, never hid their preference for Max. Dad was a former high school football star himself, and he saw Max as a continuation of his legacy. They'd attend every single one of Max's games, cheering from the sidelines and beaming with pride. But when it came to my art shows or writing competitions, they often had excuses for why they couldn't make it. I vividly remember my first big art show in middle school. I had worked for weeks on a series of watercolor paintings inspired by our family's summer trips to Lake Michigan. The night of the show, I stood nervously by my display, scanning the crowd for my parents' faces. They had promised to come, but as the evening wore on, they were nowhere to be seen. Later, I found out they had decided to attend Max's football practice instead, not wanting to miss his preparation for the big game that weekend. When we were younger, I tried desperately to win their approval. I joined the debate team, thinking that perhaps my way with words could impress them. I took up piano lessons, hoping that if I couldn't be an athlete, I could at least be a musician. I even attempted to play volleyball, but my lack of coordination and athletic ability only seemed to highlight the divide between Max and me. As we entered high school, the gap between us only widened. Max became the star quarterback, leading our school team to state championships. He was popular, dated the head cheerleader, and was voted prom king. I found my niche with the artsy crowd, became the editor of the school literary magazine, and spent my weekends volunteering at the local animal shelter. Our different paths became even more apparent when it came time for college. Max was recruited by several Ivy League schools and eventually accepted a full football scholarship to a prestigious university on the East Coast. Our parents threw a huge party to celebrate, inviting what felt like the entire town. They spoke at length about how proud they were and how Max was fulfilling the family's dreams. When it came to my college decisions, the response was much more subdued. I had been accepted to a well-regarded art school in Chicago, but my parents were hesitant about me pursuing a risky career in the arts. They suggested I stay local and pursue a practical degree. After much debate and several tearful arguments, we compromised. I stayed in state but went to a university known for its graphic design program, balancing my passion for art with a more marketable skill. The 4 years of college were a turning point for me. Away from the constant comparison to Max, I flourished. I made friends who appreciated my creativity, joined the university's design club, and even had my work featured in several student exhibitions. But every time I called home to share my achievements, the conversation inevitably turned to Max's latest football victory or academic award. The real turning point came during my college graduation. My parents had promised to attend, and I was excited to show them how well I had done, hoping that seeing my success firsthand might finally make them proud. But 2 days before the ceremony, they called to say they couldn't make it. Max had a job interview in New York for a prestigious finance firm, and they wanted to support him. They said they'd make it up to me, but I knew in my heart that this was just another in a long line of disappointments. That was the day I decided to distance myself from my family. After graduation, I moved to a different city and limited my contact with them. I'd call once a month and visit during major holidays, but that was it. I focused on building my career and creating a life for myself. Over the years, I've become successful in my field. I started as a junior designer at a small agency, working long hours and taking on freelance projects on the side to build my portfolio. My hard work paid off, and I climbed the ranks quickly. 3 years ago, I took a leap of faith and started my own design agency. It was scary at first, but my years of networking and building a reputation in the industry helped me secure some great clients early on. Now, my agency is thriving. We work with a mix of local businesses and national brands, and I have a team of talented designers working for me. I'm proud of what I've accomplished, but I can't help feeling a twinge of sadness that my parents don't seem to understand or appreciate my success. Last month, I received an invitation to Max's engagement party. He's marrying Sarah, 30F, his college sweetheart. They've been together since sophomore year, and she comes from a family similar to ours: traditional, sports oriented, and very focused on conventional success. I was hesitant to go to the party. The thought of facing my family and their friends, all gathered to celebrate Max once again, made my stomach churn. But my longtime boyfriend, Eric, 30M, encouraged me to attend. Eric and I have been together for 5 years. We met at a design conference where he was representing his tech startup. He's always been supportive of my career and has seen firsthand how my family dynamics have affected me. He thought the engagement party might be a chance to reconnect with my family on neutral ground and maybe show them how well I'm doing. The party was last weekend, and it was as uncomfortable as I expected. It was held at my parents' country club, a place I'd always felt out of place as a kid. As soon as we arrived, I could feel the stares and whispers. It had been a while since I'd been to a family event, and I guess people were curious about the prodigal daughter's return. My parents fawned over Max and Sarah, barely acknowledging my presence or introducing Eric to anyone. I overheard my mom telling her friends about Max's recent promotion at his finance job, gushing about his corner office and company car. When one of her friends politely asked about me, my mom vaguely mentioned that I do something with computers before quickly changing the subject. What really got to me was overhearing my dad introduce Max to his golf buddies as his only child. When I confronted him about it later, he brushed it off, saying he meant only son and that I was being too sensitive. But the hurt in his dismissal was clear. The final straw came during the toast. My parents spoke at length about how proud they were of Max, how he was everything they'd ever wanted in a child. They talked about his football victories, his academic achievements, his successful career. They gushed about Sarah and how excited they were to welcome her to the family. They didn't mention me once. It was as if I didn't exist. I couldn't take it anymore and left the party early, ignoring the confused looks from the other guests. Eric followed me out, concern etched on his face. We drove home in silence, the weight of years of neglect and disappointment hanging heavy between us. Now, I'm seriously considering cutting all ties with my family. I've spent years trying to prove my worth to them, and I'm exhausted. Every interaction leaves me feeling smaller, less significant. I've built a successful life for myself, but in their eyes, it seems I'll never measure up to Max. Eric thinks I should give them one last chance to explain themselves. He comes from a close-knit family and believes in the importance of familial bonds. He suggests that perhaps they don't realize how their actions have affected me, and that a frank conversation might open their eyes. But I'm not sure I want to hear their excuses anymore. I'm torn between wanting to preserve what little family connection I have left and protecting my own mental well-being. The thought of confronting them is daunting, but the idea of continuing this cycle of disappointment is equally unappealing. Am I overreacting? Should I try to have a final conversation with them, or just walk away? I'm at a crossroads, and I'm not sure which path to take. Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1. It's been a month since my last post, and a lot has happened. After much consideration and many long talks with Eric, I decided to have one final conversation with my parents before making any drastic decisions. Eric's support has been unwavering through all of this, and his perspective has been invaluable. I invited my parents to meet me at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in the city, about halfway between their home and mine. To my surprise, they agreed without hesitation. I spent the days leading up to the meeting feeling anxious, rehearsing what I wanted to say, and trying to prepare myself for their potential reactions. When we met, the atmosphere was tense. My mom looked nervous, fidgeting with her coffee cup, while my dad maintained his usual stoic expression. I took a deep breath and laid everything out on the table. I told them how their favoritism had affected me throughout my life, from the missed art shows in elementary school to the skipped college graduation. I explained how hurt I was by their actions at Max's engagement party, and how I felt like an outsider in my own family. I shared specific memories that had stuck with me, like the time in high school when I won a statewide writing competition, and instead of congratulating me, they asked why I couldn't put that much effort into my math grades like Max did. Or the Christmas when Max got a car for his gift, and I got a generic art set from the local craft store. Their reactions were unexpected. My mom burst into tears, mascara streaking down her cheeks. My dad, usually so composed, looked shaken. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, he spoke up. His voice was gruff, emotions clearly foreign territory for him. He admitted that they had always struggled to understand me and my choices. He confessed that Max was easier for them to relate to. His interests and goals aligned more closely with their own experiences and values. They fell into the habit of praising him more because his achievements were more in line with their expectations. My dad then shared something I'd never known. He told me about his own father, my grandfather, who had passed away before I was born. Apparently, my grandfather had been a harsh man, only showing approval for traditionally masculine pursuits. My dad had grown up feeling inadequate because he preferred football to working on cars like his father. He realized with evident shame that he had unknowingly perpetuated this cycle with me. My mom, through her tears, confessed that she had always been proud of me, but didn't know how to express it. She admitted feeling intimidated by my creativity and independence, traits she had always wished she possessed herself. She said she admired how I had forged my own path, but felt like she couldn't connect with me the way she did with Max. While I appreciated their honesty, their words didn't erase years of hurt. I told them that if we were to have any relationship moving forward, things needed to change. I suggested family therapy, thinking it might help us learn to communicate better and understand each other's perspectives. To my disappointment, they were hesitant about therapy. My dad said he didn't believe in airing family issues to strangers, and my mom worried about what people would think if they found out. Their reaction reminded me of how deeply ingrained their concern for appearances was, and how it had shaped our family dynamic over the years. We left the meeting with a tentative agreement to work on our relationship. They promised to make more of an effort to show interest in my life and career, and I agreed to be more open with them about my feelings and experiences. It felt like a small step, but at least it was in the right direction. A week after our meeting, I received a call from Max. Apparently, our parents had talked to him about our conversation. To my surprise, Max apologized for never standing up for me or acknowledging the obvious favoritism. He admitted that he had always felt guilty about it, but didn't know how to address it without seeming ungrateful. Max suggested that we meet up, just the two of us, to talk things through. I agreed, curious to hear his perspective. We met for coffee last weekend at a little cafe near my office. It was the first real conversation we'd had in years, without the buffer of family gatherings or holiday small talk. We talked about our childhood, our current lives, and our shared experiences with our parents. Max confessed that the pressure of being the golden child had its own challenges. He always felt like he couldn't make any mistakes or show any weakness. Every achievement just raised the bar higher for the next expectation. He shared a story from college that surprised me. Apparently, in his junior year, he had seriously considered quitting football and changing his major to education. He had discovered a passion for teaching while tutoring some of his teammates. But he was too afraid to tell our parents, worried about disappointing them. So he stuck with finance, following the path they had always envisioned for him. By the end of our meeting, we both felt like we had gained a better understanding of each other. The rivalry that had defined our relationship for so long began to fade, replaced by a tentative sense of camaraderie. Max even expressed interest in seeing some of my design work, which was a first. He admitted he had always admired my creativity but never knew how to express it. As for my parents, they've been making small efforts. My mom called to ask about a project. I mentioned it I was working on, showing genuine interest in the design process. My dad sent an email congratulating me on a recent client acquisition that I had posted about on LinkedIn. He even asked some questions about how I had landed the account, seeming to realize for the first time that running my own agency required business acumen as well as creativity. It's a start, but I'm still cautious. Years of ingrained behavior don't change overnight, and I'm not sure if these small gestures will lead to lasting change. Eric has been incredibly supportive throughout all of this, reminding me that it's okay to take things slow and protect my boundaries. He's been my sounding board, helping me process my emotions after each interaction with my family. For now, I'm cautiously optimistic, but still guarded. I've decided to take things one day at a time and see if my family can consistently show that they're willing to change. I'm learning to appreciate the small steps while still maintaining realistic expectations. I know the road ahead won't be easy. There will likely be setbacks and moments of frustration. But for the first time in a long while, I feel like there's a possibility of having a real relationship with my family. One based on mutual understanding and respect rather than expectations and disappointments. I'll keep you all updated on how things progress. Thank you for all your support and advice on my original post. It really helped me find the courage to have that difficult conversation with my parents. Update 2. It's been 3 months since my last update, and I wish I had better news to share. Initially, things seemed to be improving with my family. My parents made efforts to stay in touch, asking about my work and life. They even attended a small gallery showing where some of my design work was featured. It wasn't a big event, but their presence meant a lot to me. Max and I had a few more meetups, and our relationship was slowly improving. We even started a tradition of sending each other funny memes or interesting articles related to our respective fields. However, everything came crashing down last month during our family's annual summer gathering. It's a tradition that goes back to my grandparents' time, a week-long reunion at our parents' lake house. Extended family from all over the country come together for barbecues, water sports, and catching up. I hadn't attended in years, always finding excuses to be busy with work. But this time I decided to go, hoping to see if the positive changes in our immediate family dynamic would hold up in a larger setting. Eric and I arrived on a Sunday afternoon. The lake house was just as I remembered, a sprawling wooden structure with a large deck overlooking the water. The smell of pine trees and the sound of lapping waves brought back a flood of childhood memories, both good and bad. The first few days were okay. My parents introduced Eric to the family, and they seemed genuinely interested in our relationship. Aunt Linda, always the romantic, kept hinting about wedding bells, making Eric blush. Uncle Pete, the family historian, cornered us one evening to share old stories about the lake house, including some embarrassing tales from my childhood that had Eric in stitches. Max and I even shared a few inside jokes, much to the surprise of our cousins who were used to seeing us distant. We teamed up for the annual family volleyball tournament, our complementary skills, his athleticism and my strategic thinking, taking us to the finals before we were defeated by our uber-competitive cousins, the twins. But on the fourth day, during the big family dinner that's always held midweek, things took a turn. My aunt asked about our careers, wanting updates since last year's gathering. My dad immediately launched into a detailed account of Max's recent promotion. He went on and on about Max's new role as a senior financial analyst, the big accounts he was handling, and how he was on track to make partner in a few years. When it came to my turn, my dad fumbled. He vaguely mentioned that I do something with computers, his tone dismissive. The contrast to how he had spoken about Max was stark and painful. I was hurt but decided to speak up for myself. I explained my role as the owner of a successful design agency, even mentioning a recent high-profile client we had landed, a well-known tech startup that had been featured in several business magazines. I talked about how our designs had helped increase their user engagement by 40%, and how we were now in talks with several other Silicon Valley companies. To my shock, my dad interrupted me, saying, "Well, it's not like it's a real company like Max's, is it? It's just you and a few friends playing around on computers." The table fell silent. I was stunned, feeling like I'd been slapped. All the progress we had made over the past few months seemed to evaporate in an instant. I looked at my mom, hoping she'd say something, but she just stared at her plate, avoiding eye contact. Max, to his credit, tried to defend me. He spoke up saying, "Dad, that's not fair. Alice runs a legitimate business. She has employees, clients, and from what I've seen, she's doing really well. But our dad brushed him off, saying, "You don't need to stick up for her, Max. We all know real success when we see it." I couldn't take it anymore. The familiar feeling of being small and insignificant in my family's eyes came rushing back. I stood up, thanked everyone for dinner, and announced that Eric and I would be leaving early. As we walked away, I could hear my relatives murmuring, some expressing confusion, others disapproval at my dramatics. As we packed our bags, my mom came to our room begging us to stay. She said Dad didn't mean it, that he was just caught up in the moment. But I had heard enough excuses. I told her that this was exactly why I had distanced myself from the family in the first place, and that I couldn't keep subjecting myself to this kind of treatment. We left that night, driving the 5 hours back to the city in near silence. Eric was furious on my behalf, but I just felt numb. When we got home, I blocked my parents' numbers and removed them from my social media. I wasn't ready to deal with their inevitable attempts at explanations or apologies. Max called me a few days later. He apologized profusely for not doing more at the dinner and said he had a huge fight with our parents after we left. He told me that he finally understood why I had distanced myself all these years. He said he had always known there was favoritism, but he hadn't realized how deeply it affected me until he saw my face when Dad made that comment. I appreciated Max's support, but I told him I needed time. The incident at the lake house made me realize that despite their promises, my parents' behavior was deeply ingrained. It wasn't just about favoritism anymore. It was about basic respect and recognition of my worth as an individual. For now, I'm focusing on my own life. Eric has been my rock through all of this, providing a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on when needed. We're actually talking about getting engaged ourselves. He says he wants to prove that someone sees my true worth, even if my parents can't. My design agency is thriving. The client I mentioned at the dinner has indeed signed with us, and we're in the process of expanding our team to handle the increased workload. I'm channeling my energy into my work, finding solace in the creative process and the tangible results of my efforts. I'm not sure what the future holds for my relationship with my family. Part of me wants to give them another chance, remembering the small steps forward we had taken. But a larger part is tired of being hurt over and over again. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time and prioritizing my own well-being. This experience has reinforced for me the importance of surrounding myself with people who truly support and value me. I'm grateful for Eric, for my friends, and for the fulfilling career I've built for myself. These are the foundations of my happiness, and I'm learning that it's okay if my family isn't a part of that picture right now. I'll update again if anything significant changes, but for now, I'm focused on healing and moving forward. Update 3. It's been 6 months since the disastrous family gathering, and I've had minimal contact with my family since then. However, recent events have forced me to confront the situation once again. 3 weeks ago, I received a call from Max. His voice was shaky as he told me that our dad had suffered a heart attack. Despite our issues, I couldn't ignore such a serious situation. I immediately booked a flight back to my hometown, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I arrived at the hospital to find my mom and Max already there. The atmosphere was tense, to say the least. My mom seemed relieved to see me, pulling me into a tight hug that felt both familiar and foreign. Max looked exhausted, the strain of the situation evident in the dark circles under his eyes. Dad was in the ICU, hooked up to various machines that beeped and whirred constantly. Seeing him like that, pale, vulnerable, so unlike the strong, opinionated man I knew, was jarring. For a moment, all the hurt and resentment I'd been carrying faded away, replaced by a simple concern for his well-being. The doctors explained that while the heart attack was severe, Dad had a good chance of recovery with proper care and lifestyle changes. As we discussed his treatment plan, I found myself slipping into project management mode, asking questions about timelines and next steps. It was easier to focus on these practical matters than to confront the emotional complexity of the situation. During a moment when we were alone, my dad spoke up. His voice was weak, but his words were clear. He apologized for his behavior at the lake house and throughout my life. He admitted that he had always struggled to understand my choices and that his own insecurities about not having a traditional career had led him to overcompensate by praising Max's corporate success. He told me about his own father, my grandfather, who had been a successful businessman. Apparently, my grandfather had always made my dad feel inadequate for choosing to be a high school teacher instead of joining the family business. Dad said he realized he had unknowingly repeated this pattern with me, pushing his unfulfilled dreams and expectations onto his children. While I appreciated his words, I made it clear that an apology, while necessary, wasn't enough to erase years of hurt. I told him that if he truly wanted to make amends, he needed to show it through his actions over time. In the weeks that followed, as Dad recovered, I've seen small but consistent efforts from both my parents. My mom has been calling regularly, genuinely asking about my work and my life with Eric. She even asked to see some of my recent design projects, showing a real interest in understanding what I do. My dad, still recovering at home, has been sending emails. They're awkward at first, clearly out of his comfort zone, but sincere in their attempts to engage with my world. He's been asking about my business, trying to understand the challenges and successes I face as an entrepreneur. Max has been instrumental in this process. He's been acting as a mediator, encouraging our parents to make efforts and keeping me updated on their progress. He even suggested that we all attend family therapy, an idea our parents are now considering. It's a big step for them, given their previous resistance to the idea. As for me, I'm cautiously allowing them back into my life, but on my terms. I've made it clear that I won't tolerate any more dismissive comments about my career or life choices. I've also been more assertive about sharing my accomplishments and expecting them to be acknowledged. Eric proposed last month, on the 5-year anniversary of the day we met. Sharing that news with my family was a test of sorts. To my surprise, their reaction was genuinely positive. My mom even asked if she could be involved in the wedding planning, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a year ago. I'm not naive enough to think that everything is fixed. There's still a long way to go, and I'm prepared for setbacks. Old habits die hard, and I know there will be times when my parents slip back into their old patterns. But for the first time in a long while, I feel hopeful about the possibility of having a healthier relationship with my family. This experience has taught me the importance of standing up for myself and not accepting less than I deserve, even from family. It's also shown me the value of giving people the chance to change while still maintaining firm boundaries. As I look towards the future, my upcoming wedding, my growing business, and this evolving family dynamic, I feel stronger and more secure in myself than ever before. Whatever happens, I know that I have the resilience to handle it, and a support system in Eric and my chosen family to lean on. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and encouragement have been invaluable. I'll update again if there are any significant developments, but for now, I'm cautiously optimistic about the road ahead.